5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, YouTube and my fellow friends and anonymous supporters out there. It's great to be back with you again. I was gone for a few days. I had to get a new CPU, and with that came some complications with overheating, but we got that taken care of. And in that time frame, I came across some information about the 4 Americans who were kidnapped over in Mexico. 2 of them were killed and 2 survived. And in that time, a lot of information about the story came out. So if you don't know, what you're seeing now is the video feed at that time of the kidnapping taking place on surveillance camera out there in Mexico. You'll see the cartel members put the 4 victims. 2 of them were presumed dead at the scene when they were shot at and carjacked. Right there. And so with that, it became an international story. The American government, the Mexican government, the Mexican security forces, military, and National Guard got involved with that situation. And they were able to find those 4 Americans. They were in some small town out there in a wood shack. And they found the bodies of the 2 deceased kidnapped victims also. And so they processed them, get them ready to come back to America. And during that time, after the incident had made international news, members of the cartel, the Gulf Cartel, issued an apology not only to the Mexican citizens, but to the Americans, citizens who were victim of the members of that cartel's kidnapping and murder. And what they did, the 5 cartel members who were involved in the kidnapping were forced to give themselves up to Mexican authorities, and a letter in the vehicle that they were associated with was placed on the windshield. And pretty much the letter said, we don't condone the harming of innocent people. We don't condone the actions of these 5 members of the cartel, and they will willingly give themselves over to authorities to be punished by law. So pretty much that's what that letter said. And it was pretty shocking for many people in the news, because even me personally, there's never been a time where the cartel have apologized for any of their actions. You may not be familiar with this cartel. It's called the Gulf Cartel out there in Mexico. And with just a little bit of searching, you'll be able to find torture videos carried out by this cartel, torture and murder and just horrible scenes of violence carried out by this very specific cartel can be found on the internet. And to get an apology from them for the murder of 3 people, so it was 2 Americans and 1 Mexican woman who was killed in their shooting rampage out there. And so they apologized to all the victims, even those who survived. And so it was very shocking and surprising to have them apologize and to turn over the members of their cartel over. It's very admirable of them, to say the least. They are a cartel. And many in the media were surprised and kind of disappointed, I guess would be the word, because what they're not saying, they're just saying 4 Americans were kidnapped, but these were 4 Black Americans that were kidnapped. And so to have the cartel apologize for doing harm to them, but not ever apologize for the harm that has come to white people who were in Mexico, who were harmed and killed and tortured and put up a ransom. They felt, people in the white media felt a little disrespected and kind of salty about that. And so what they did what my major point of this video is not only to give you a little information about what happened, but what I also want to do what I'm really here to make the video and to focus on is the media's damning and disrespecting the victims of this cartel crime. As black people in this country, it's very hard for us to get a clean slate even after we do a crime and we serve the time and we pay the fines and we do anything. For the rest of our lives, we're going to be associated with that mistake that we made. And so, and the same thing goes for these four victims. The news media, the Western news media, has taken it upon themselves to demonize, to vilify the victims of this cartel hit. So, let's start with this one. This article is from the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail is a UK media outlet. They have close ties with American media. And in this headline, a few days after the Americans were found, it says cocaine cowboys, American man killed in Mexico border kidnapped, was jailed in 2015 for drug manufacturing, while the other three have lengthy rap sheets, drug raps. What the Western media is attempting to do is to get the American people off the bandwagon of feeling any sort of sympathy for these victims of this crime, and to get them feeling a sense of they brought it on themselves. Basically, what they're trying to do is convince the American people is that these people, these black people, brought this crime on themselves, and it could be simply because they were involved in some drug trafficking or drug deal gone bad, when that is absolutely not the case. You have victims of a crime who are forced to defend themselves and their past mistakes, while also dealing with the terrible trauma of being kidnapped by people who make videos on the internet for entertainment. They make snuff films on the internet for entertainment, these cartels. And so they, instead of simply being the victim, getting the help that you need, and being seen and noticed as someone who a terrible crime has been committed against, now the two people are dead, they can't defend themselves, and the two black people who are victims of this kidnapping have to defend themselves from their own country's media apparatus to say, hey, this had absolutely nothing to do with us trying to go down there and get drugs or sell drugs or buy drugs and transport into America. We were just there so our female friend can get a tummy tuck, and we was there for her assistance and to be by her side, and also to see the beautiful country of Mexico because we've never been. That sounds too much like right to the American media. They had to go dig into some information even further back as 8 years ago in 2015 for one of the victims simply for selling crack cocaine at one point. Crack cocaine is a victimless crime. It's between consenting adults, and it's illegal, granted, but it absolutely isn't a crime of where there's a victim who's been hurt against their will or anything like that. It's no different than the American government punishing black people with decades in prison sentences. Then all of a sudden they want to make those very drugs that put those black people in jail legal, and then those who made it legal want to make sure that white people are the main ones who can profit off of the ability to sell the narcotics now. This is the female who was going down there to get her tummy tuck. In the caption, it says, Mexican law enforcement agents are investigating the possibility that members of the drug cartel kidnapped 4 Americans last Friday, thinking they were encroaching on their turf. I don't know what would be the point of even investigating such an idiotic hypothesis as that. These black people were from North Carolina. Why in the world would you come from America, North Carolina, to go sell and set up shop in Mexico, and you don't even speak Spanish? You don't live there. You have no connections there. You simply went there for a medical procedure for your friend. It makes absolutely no sense for small level middle class, lower middle class black people to go all the way to Mexico to try to set up some sort of drug empire. It's just stupid. And it's just being used and being put out there by Western media to say that these black people should not be seen as victims. They're the cause of their own issues. In a previous video I mentioned that white society cannot have black people seen as the victim even when crimes are committed against them. They can't do that, because if you start seeing black people as victims, if you start seeing black people as someone who harm can come to that is no fault of their own, then that will allow you to have sympathy towards black people. And you can't afford to have sympathy towards black people when your greatest pastime is the harming of black people. And so that's extremely terrible that these black people will still have to sit up here, deal with the PTSD, the trauma, and then they have to deal with the stigma of not having a perfect, clean record against their own media. And then not only that, they have to deal with being accused or being looked into as being some part of some attempted drug empire, conglomerate apparatus or something. It just makes no sense at all. For it wouldn't even make sense if they went down there to go to Mexico to get some drugs. Why would you go thousands of miles away to a different country and you don't speak the language, even to get a pound of cocaine, and risk bringing that back into America? You can get a pound of cocaine from North Carolina. You don't have to go to Mexico to get it. These people, who they think these people are? Huh? What are they, Frank Lucas or something? It's just, it's just, they'll put it's no such thing as an innocent black person. Like I said, remember when I made the point in the previous video, and I said when people get on the jury and they let off these police officers and these normal citizens, they let them go free from killing black people, even though the evidence suggests that they should be punished for that crime, they still say that they're not guilty. And the reason they say that these people are not guilty is because these black people must have done something. They always have to put it in the mind of the American public that, yeah, this black person had this crime done to them, but they must have done something. Otherwise, it would have never happened to them. However, you can get white people and every other race of people from America go down to Mexico and end up missing and kidnapped and ask for ransom, and not in one single article would you be able to find a search of their backgrounds. This is a story that happened in Ohio last year. It was about an architect who went out to Mexico. I think his fiance stayed out there in Mexico, and his family didn't hear from him. And after a while, they just couldn't find out where he was. Then they found his body. They did DNA tests on some bodies they found. Turns out it was the guy, the architect body they found, his fiance, and I believe 2 of their family members out there. Now, I found this article looking for kidnappings in Mexico. At the very beginning, I was only able to find the most recent, the one that happened to these black people. But doing some more digging, I was able to find other situations of kidnappings that happened in Mexico. And this was one that came across because this one spanned, I believe, a few months. From the time he went missing to it was reported to the media, to they was searching and waiting to get any new evidence on where he could be, and then to the time they found that body and did the DNA test. That was a few months. And in that entire time period of searching and seeing all these articles with different dates leading up to when they did the DNA test, there was not one single mention of anybody in this man's or his wife's or her family's background. They never do background. They don't even do background checks and psychoanalysis and drug tests on police officers who kill innocent people. But why in the world would you not consider that this man, who's an architect, probably went to Mexico to buy drugs, and it was a drug deal going bad? Why wouldn't you just assume that that's not the case? Even if he doesn't have a criminal record, that doesn't mean anything. Serial killers don't have a criminal record until they get in trouble for something. Just because you're a criminal just because you don't have a criminal record does not mean you're not a criminal. You just haven't been caught and convicted of a crime yet. So this whole idea of having a criminal record automatically puts you in a category of possibly being at fault for any harm that comes to you. It's the exact same thing that not having a criminal record can mean that you're at fault and responsible for having harm done unto you also. There's never a question or mention of white people's criminal records when harm is done unto them. The only issue that's important is that what harm was done, who's responsible for it, and how they will be punished. But when it comes to black people, it seems to be harm was done unto them. What did they do to cause it? What's their background? Who's the person who did it to them? Maybe they did something to the person to set them off and cause harm unto themselves. Even when black children are being shot in the street by police, they're sitting up here saying, well, that kid shouldn't have been playing with that toy gun in the park, when toy guns are everywhere in this nation. There's absolutely no reason and justification for trying to make sense or provide justification for the harming of a child simply because of the race of that child. It's not out of the realm of normal for people to go to other countries for medical procedures where it's more affordable. Thousands of people do that every year. Thousands of people every year go to Mexico just to have fun, for vacations. Thousands of American students, particularly white students, go to Mexico to have a good time. And it's commonly known that they go down there and they do lots of drugs and drink lots of alcohol. But you will never find something happening to one of those students, like being kidnapped by the cartel, and the media and the American media justifying it or trying to make light of it simply because they were down there during spring break and happened to be doing drugs when they were kidnapped. It won't happen because it's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant the backgrounds of these 4 black people when they was in the country of Mexico. It was totally absolutely irrelevant what their background was and their criminal record was compared to what happened to them. Had absolutely nothing to do with what they did in the past. And it's like when you have media, like the media of your own country demonize terrorist acts that happen to you in other people's countries, you begin to get confused on who exactly are the terrorists. Who is the American media working for? Because it certainly isn't a black American people. It doesn't make it makes absolutely no sense to have our own media companies condemning victims of terrorism on the soil of other people, of other lands. What the cartel did was an act of terrorism, and their apology, although strange at first glance, I see why they did it. It certainly wasn't because they have some sort of consciousness and feel bad for the lives that they had took and the 2 that they kidnapped. It was simply because they understood that economically, for their small town right on the border with Texas, would suffer greatly for it. Mexico makes a whole lot of money every year through tourism, and the cartels make a whole lot of money every year by selling drugs to those tourists. And so if you have a cartel or a criminal organization inside of a country who is targeting innocent people who come to vacation or seek medical procedures, it's going to put a big hole in those tourism dollars, and thus putting a big hole in those narcotic sales dollars. This was a business decision by the cartel. It had absolutely nothing to do with feeling sorry or having empathy for the people who they harmed. It was simply a business decision. It was a shocking business decision to apologize, which is mind-blowing that they would even apologize, to be quite honest with you, consider the things that they have on the internet that they've done to others. And even in the news media, they made a point of that, saying that this is the first time the cartel has ever apologized for harming people, and basically, especially considering that they have snuff films on the internet, and the fact that they decided to apologize, and the people who they apologized to were black, it made the media feel some type of way. I'm going to go ahead and play this video from ABC News. It's talking about the apology from the cartel, and I believe this is the video where one of the white commentators makes a point of that. So here we go. We're going to start from the beginning.
On a much more serious note, 5 alleged cartel members are now in custody after the kidnapping and killings of 4 Americans in Mexico. Authorities say they found the 5 men tied up near a pickup truck with an apology note allegedly turned in by cartel leadership. Our Matt Rivers is in Mexico City with the latest.
This morning, the stunning image. 5 men tied up near a truck in Mexico, blamed for the kidnapping of 4 Americans, allegedly turned over by the powerful drug cartel they belong to. A handwritten note on the truck's windshield claiming to be from the Gulf Cartel, saying, quote, "We have decided to deliver those involved and directly responsible." The images obtained by ABC News from a source close to the investigation also include this photo of guns, ammunition, and body armor found in that truck. The men blamed for this horrific abduction caught on camera a week ago that left 2 Americans dead. On Thursday, state police finding them at the same spot in Matamoros where the kidnapping took place. The men now in custody, though authorities not confirming whether these 5 were involved. Multiple Mexican law enforcement sources tell ABC News the cartel note is believed to be legitimate, but neither ABC News nor U.S. officials have been able to verify the authenticity of the letter's claims.
The cartel has been known to police itself when necessary. And it's not of any surprise that they're under a lot of pressure to put this behind them and try to distance themselves as best they can.
Now new details emerging about the Americans' trip before they crossed into Mexico for a cosmetic procedure. A 5th person traveling with them, Cheryl Orange, left behind in Texas because she didn't have the proper ID, speaking out to CNN overnight.
She hit me up and asked me to join her, to accompany her, and we began the road trip. I didn't have proper identification, so I couldn't join her to go across to the border, which left me back at the hotel.
The group then going on without her, seen here live streaming from Mexico shortly before they were kidnapped.
Said that they would return in 15 minutes. 15 minutes had gone by, they were not there. I called the cops immediately.
4 days later, after an urgent search, officials finding Latavia McGee and Eric James Williams alive inside this wooden shack just outside of town. The bodies of their friends, Shaid Woodard and Zindell Brown, at the same location. Investigators also locating 5 vehicles, including a stolen Lamborghini and an ambulance used to transport the victims in Matamoros. And overnight, the bodies of Woodard and Brown brought back to the United States. Woodard's father remembering him on the day he would have turned 34.
That was my youngest child. You know, he was my baby, you know. For him to be taken from me like that, it was very, very hurtful. A parent never expects to lose a child.
No, they shouldn't. And Matt Rivers joins me live now from Mexico City for more on this. Matt, you say it may have been cartel leadership that turned these guys in. Why turn in your own guys? How are Mexican authorities explaining this?
You know, as strange as it might sound, this is something that has happened before in Mexico. There's this kind of false code here in Mexico, where different Mexican cartels like to think of themselves as some sort of Robin Hood organization. They don't attack innocents. They don't do anything wrong like that. They only attack people who quote unquote deserve it. We all know that that is total BS, to be quite frank. And yet that is like what they like to do on a public, like a PR basis. So we have seen cartels do this sort of self-policing before, all the way out in Sinaloa in the west part. The Sinaloa cartel, the Gulf cartel itself has done this before. So it's not something totally out of the blue. That said, investigators are looking at this. They're talking to these 5 men to see if they actually are those responsible for this kidnapping, or if this is all some sort of just an elaborate ruse to try and get some of the heat off of the cartel at this point. We are expecting Mexican officials, Diane, to update this a little bit later today.
All right, Matt Rivers in Mexico City, thank you.
Now, there is no heat on the Mexican drug cartel. The Mexican drug cartel is the government and the police force of the country. They have people everywhere. They're not facing any pressure. They got better guns than the police. They're not under pressure or in any, trying to save face because they're afraid that there may be a crackdown on their organization. Their organization has much more pull and influence than even the police of Mexico. And many of the members of the government of Mexico have some influence and are part of the cartels as well. Like I said, this whole thing about the cartel apologizing was a business decision, not to scare tourism away. Because if you scare tourism away, that's millions upon millions of dollars of your drug money just gone. And that's a lot of your drugs just sitting on the shelves, I guess, so to say, going bad. So this was a business decision for them to save some money and to publicly punish those who were responsible by doing the right thing, by giving them over to the police forces. Now, whether those 5 men are actually those men in the video responsible for the crime, I don't know. I'm sure that it'll come out whether they are or not. I think they are. Or if not, these are men who are willing to take the rap for them and, have their families taken care of. So either way, somebody's going to jail for it. These 5 men are going to jail for it because they wouldn't dare say that they're not the ones if the cartel say you are the ones. So back to what I was originally saying about the point of my video is that the American media is full of it. And it's really sad that our own media outlets and companies and those affiliated with American and Western media will still find a way to demonize black people even when we've done nothing wrong. But let this happen. How could he? Cops hunt Dallas man seen dumping his German Shepherd on country road with frightened animal running after owner's car as he drove off. Oh, but you let your dog, your adult dog, out on the side of the road, and they got all the sympathy in the world for that dog. They want to start a manhunt. They want to find you. Look at that. You can't tell me that dog is more valuable than 4 black people. And if you say that he's not, then you're a liar. This dog life matters. This German Shepherd dog life matters. Those black people out there in Mexico, it's their fault. They had a criminal record. They probably was going down there to sell drugs, and don't know black people got money to go to Mexico for a tummy tuck. But they certainly got money to go buy some bricks from Mexico though. Whatever, man. But I want to thank you all for taking the time to hear my rant and my opinions about this situation. As more information comes out that I feel is necessary to share with you all, I promise I'll be here to bring that information with you all. In the meantime, I want you all to stay in the shadows, stay anonymous, and to just be safe out there, all right?